And we're live, finally, amazing. Right, full start. If you can't hear the audio, make sure you tell me in the comments. I think the audio is working now. It seems like it's working. It was working for me all the time. I just restarted the stream and it just seems to be working again. It seemed to work on private. Anyway, Congress is trying really hard to understand cryptocurrencies, like really hard. And I think that this is a concern. They don't want to be in the same position that they are with social media, where they're playing a lot of catch up. They're really trying to understand what this technology is, what sort of threat it poses to government, to money in general. The dollar is this sort of base currency for most of the world's economy, and so anything that undermines that is within everybody's interest to kind of at least understand what it is, the nature of it. Is it a currency? Is it an asset? And at the moment, things like Bitcoin, they're classed as an asset. It's a thing that you can buy and sell. It's not a currency. It's not an exchange of value. But it seems that they are not done here, and that they want to continue to understand what this technology is and to see what regulation is needed. There is regulation with cryptocurrency already, but probably not as much as they're going to be just around the corner. So we just seen a live stream of Congress just asking certain crypto CEOs about cryptocurrency, about Bitcoin and Ethereum and blockchains in general, how they work, stable coins as well, and what could the potential dangers be. And it's really interesting. You get some people, some members of Congress who are extremely negative and extremely against the idea of cryptocurrency, and then you have some others that, in my opinion, understand the technology a little bit better, and they just want to understand and learn and see if there is a potential threat. They haven't made their mind up yet, and I think this is really key. If too many people assume that crypto and blockchain is something that it isn't, then there could be some really negative effects for this fantastic technology. I think decentralized systems in general are probably better, and it would be kind of hypocritical for Congress to start banning decentralized, more privacy-focused systems and apps and global systems that are privacy-focused, where you own your data and all the data is distributed, while at the same time they're attacking people like Facebook and Google for doing the exact opposite. So Congress must be on the fence about this internally, where if you attack Google and Facebook for consolidating people's data and not letting them have control over it, then you can't then go and ban crypto for allowing them to then do the exact opposite. So this is kind of interesting. I wanted to start the live stream on this because I think that this is probably something we're going to see more about. We're probably going to see more regulation. We're probably going to see more confusion over what crypto is. And also with the explosion of NFTs during COVID, there is a new asset class and there's new exchange of value that people need to get their head around. And I just think it is fascinating that governments are trying to understand this when it's only really just starting to hit the mainstream. Crypto has been around for years, for arguably longer than social media, but it is probably time that governments start looking at this, and fingers crossed we don't mess it up in the process. But the main thing I wanted to talk about today is that Google DeepMind are putting their new language model through its paces. So they have a 280 billion parameter model. It's a natural language model. This is the equivalent, their equivalent to like GPT-3, and it's called Gopher. Its whole job is to understand natural language, to process it, to understand it, to talk and sort of read. So to hold conversations and read text and understand it. And this is really fascinating, but I do have a kind of like a little reservation about these kind of systems, which is I think that these systems are too big, and I don't think that this is hello, welcome. Can you comment if the audio is working? I think the audio is working. All right, so I think that these AI models are getting too large. I don't think that they are necessarily fair for most developers. So like Google DeepMind, they have a lot of money and they can train a 280 billion parameter natural language model and they can just play around with it. But there isn't much hope for running that model off of a data center, for example, locally on your machine. Even if you have a really expensive local machine, it probably won't be able to run this model very fast, and it certainly won't be able to train the model. Maybe pre-tune, but essentially we're now in this territory where the large companies have a massive advantage over smaller AI companies. I am biased because I run a small AI company, but this basically takes the technology out of the reach of most people, and then it will form a commercial solution, which will be an API. And we're starting to see this with GPT-3. If you want to use GPT-3 right now, you can, but you have to do it through OpenAI's API. You have to pay them to do that, and it's very difficult to actually get your app or whatever it is you're building approved by them, because they don't want the system to be misused. Whereas something like GPT-2, you can download a local version and you can just run it on your computer, and it's basically completely open source. So this is kind of interesting, but what they are saying about this, which is more positive, it's larger than GPT-3. It's most likely going to be able to understand language better. You also have NVIDIA's Megatron model, which is 530 billion parameters, which is just crazy big. But essentially, the larger the model, the more data it is learnt from, the better it will probably understand English, be able to write stories, be able to respond to emails, be able to hold a conversation, be able to summarize text, which is something I'm personally fascinated with. So this is really interesting that Google have a model and that they're still playing around with this thing. And there's a quote here, which is that this technology has not plateaued. We are still improving. When GPT-3 was released, we started to ask ourselves, is it just pointless throwing more money and more data into this system? Are we going to hit a limit? And that was actually back at GPT-1. And then we built GPT-2. I say we, I don't work for OpenAI, but as humans, we built GPT-2, and again, it performed even better. Then we built GPT-3, and it performed even better. And we've not actually hit that ceiling where you see that the transformer neural network, which is what GPT is, you're not seeing a limit for the data you're giving it, which is incredible. That means that there's still legs in this technology, there's still room for improvement. And I just think this is fascinating. But I would like to see some lighter weight models with similar capabilities. And I think that there's not enough focus on low power, smaller models that can be run locally. As the world, going back to our first story, as the world starts to think about decentralization, we're going to see a lot of centralized AI models because they're too big to run on your phone or your laptop or whatever it is. We're starting to see this already with GPT-3. Like I said, you're starting to see this with something like GitHub Copilot, which is kind of powered by GPT-3, but again, it's an API. That code is not running on your machine. And while there are some benefits, you get a lot more power, you get a lot more faster response time if you have a low power device, so you still can have access to an AI model on a low power device, but you require an internet connection, you require to share your data. And then the other end, the AI can improve from a lot more users, which is good, but it could end up with some really weird privacy issues. I know that when GitHub Copilot launched, everyone was pretty terrified that if they start putting, for example, API keys, access keys, private keys, and things like that into their code, it's going to share those back with the servers at OpenAI, which is not something we really want to do. That's obviously a huge security threat. I have some reservations about these large models, but I think overall there's a huge benefit in the AI industry to have these experiments. I do think that more research and more focus needs to go into the lower power though, because I don't see this being a very sustainable way of exploring. And we know that this is possible. This is the kind of the most exciting thing. We know that this technology is possible and that we can build really high power, really high output or accurate, powerful models that don't consume a huge amount of power. The reason we know this is because the human brain only consumes about as much power as a light bulb. So we know that AI could potentially be engineered to be as efficient, if not more efficient than the human brain. But right now, we are nowhere near that. To run GPT-3, you need a data center. To run Gopher, you need a data center. God knows what you need to run NVIDIA's 530 billion parameter model. You essentially need a supercomputer or a network of supercomputers to even use this. And so that's obviously, I think we might look back at this period in history and just say that was just crazy. You know, we were slightly looking in the wrong direction. There's actually a much more efficient way of doing that. And it might be that the answer of designing more efficient systems actually lies in building better AI. So if you can train an AI, a neural network, to design other neural networks, suddenly you think you can realize that maybe the AI can focus on efficiency and we can just focus on what we want to build. All right, let's answer some questions. We got a question. Do you think AI could take over the world like in the movies? I think actually that's a really good question. I get asked it a lot, especially over on TikTok. Essentially, I don't think that we should be worrying about AI taking over the world. I think we should be worrying about who gets the AI tools, because AI in general is a really powerful force, whether it's for good or bad, but it's not very clever. So for example, something that concerns me is putting a neural network with its only goal of optimization in charge of something like a nuclear power station. That might be good. It might be given, for example, the Google have an AI that is in charge of efficiency at their data centers. It is in control of, I think Elon Musk has brought this up before, is in control of the cooling, is in control of the network, and so it has a very specific job. It's not very clever, it's not sentient or anything, but it's just there for efficiency, to optimize, and it has one goal, and it doesn't take anything else into account. And I think we might have a problem where we see these algorithms kind of run away with themselves. And so that's fine if it's just something like autocorrect on your phone, but it's not fine if the AI is in charge of a nuclear reactor. It might be that the AI does something stupid in order to make something more efficient, or it does something where it completely misses the concept and we have some catastrophic accident. Another thing that scares me is strategy. So a lot of different, probably most countries, the military now uses AI in some form for strategy. This comes directly from AI playing video games, and so we've seen how good AI is at playing video games. DeepMind has been great at demonstrating that. That those specific rules and that type of system can also be applied to real life and unfortunately in war. And so I think that's kind of scary that we might end up trusting an AI to do something, to tell us how to fight our battles, and that might be a good thing or it might be a bad thing. Oh, I'm out of breath. I'm getting too excited about this question. I hope that answered your question, but I think I'm more worried about AI being given too much control before it's ready than AI becoming completely sentient and taking over the world. I don't think we should be giving like a simple neural network the controls of, for example, a nuclear reactor right now. I just don't think that there's enough work done in the AI safety world in order to comfortably do that. But there's also some things that I know that they can do better with AI. For example, driving. So maybe driving, it probably is time for AI to take over driving, in my opinion. Yeah. I think that the concern for AI taking over the world is a good one, and it was brought up right at the beginning. We've seen it in films for years, and we're now starting to have legitimate organizations forming around AI safety, about the ethics of using AI, bias in AI, in the data sets we use. Those are the things that scare me rather than something coming to life and taking over the world. But yeah, anyway, that's it. Those are the only stories I've got today that I could find that are interesting. I don't want to just bore you guys with a bunch of stories that I don't think are that interesting. I actually remembered my beanie today as well, which is, I'm going to give myself a pat on the back for that. So yeah, if you like this kind of content, make sure you're subscribed and you've hit the notification bell, because I'm trying to do this every single weekday if there's news to talk about. And so